Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Corey Allen alongside my wife Pam, each and every week, having straightforward, honest, real conversations about marriage and sex, the good, the bad, the ugly, the troublesome, the cruel, the underbelly, the positives, the optimal. Let's cover it all. What do you say, Pam?
Let's do.
So if you're new to the show or you want to find a handy way to tell other people about what we got going on here, check out our starter packs. These are episodes that are arranged by topic and by popularity. And you can find them at smr.fm/starter. And also, if you're new to the show, we want to hear from you, because what goes on with every the episodes we do is it's largely framed by the nation. For sure today is. This is a conversation that took place a couple weeks ago that continues on, and even John Eldridge's last week. We kind of touched on some of this with trauma and triggers and different aspects of what happens in life. And so, as part of the nation, if you listen to the show, you're part of the nation. Let's just get that in the open. We want to hear from you. So 214-702-9565 or feedback at sexymarriageradio.com with your questions, your thoughts, your feedback, your comments, even your criticisms. We want it all.
We'll take it.
Because we are in relationship with you and we want to be better as well. And one of the things that can happen that I believe fully, and I know I'm speaking for you here, that can help every couple out there be better is joining us at the Sexy Marriage Radio Getaway, which happens June 13th through the 15th in 2024. So, man, 6 months away. Just under
5 months. 5 months.
Oh, it's my mathing.
June.
My mathing is wrong. Just under 5 months away. And so registration is going on now. smr.fm/getaway is how you can save your spot and come join us. And also, since it's still January, there's a little bit of time left. If you want to enter into a giveaway we're running,
That's right.
If you leave a review on Apple Podcasts and then you send us a screenshot of the review or your username that you use, that enters you into a drawing to get your registration fee covered. And if you've already joined, we'll refund it back to you.
Yeah, you'll just have to get the hotel when you're here.
We'll make it right.
Yep.
But that goes through the end of January. So jump on, leave a review. Let us know you left a review. That gets you a chance to win the registration, which is $675 value.
Yeah.
And then it gets better. But wait, there's more. If you don't win, but you've entered and you come to the getaway, you get $75 off just by going through the process and entering. Because we want to help. We want your help in spreading the word. Plus, we want to have you come join us at the getaway.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Come do it.
Because it's a lot of fun. So coming up today on the regular version is a continuation. We did 2 weeks ago an episode on mercy sex. And there's several comments that came through. One in particular came through on the platform with a dialogue that's been taking place on how helpful that was. But we also left some things and would like to have it rounded out a little bit.
All right,
and so we're going to pick up portions of what was left as a comment at my.smr.fm in the platform and go a little deeper in a different way with the idea of the pressures that are inherent in marriage and where mercy sex or obligation sex becomes problematic. And what do each members of that spousal unit need to do about that? How do you each look at it? What's your dilemma that you're facing? And how do you navigate your way forward?
All right.
And then on the extended content today, which is deeper, longer, and there are no ads, you can subscribe at smr.fm/academy. I came across some research, and granted, it's older research. I mean, there's arguments out there. If the research is more than 10 years old, is it indeed valid? There's still seminal works that are out there.
What's the research about?
Well, thanks for helping me keep on task here, babe. This is what... The easiest way to describe this is, what are the components of optimal sexual experiences? Or put another way, how would you know great sex if you stumbled into it?
Okay. And I asked that because, and there's nothing new under the sun here, right?
Right.
And so can it be outdated if we're talking about something that's been around for thousands of years, right? So what was great sex?
Well, okay. So could research be outdated?
Might still be great sex today.
Fair. Yeah, fair. I mean, research could be outdated, but research could for sure be updated. And
It
so
could
what
be
we'll be
updated
what
for
we'll be
sure.
doing is just kind of talking through here's what jumped out in their research that they found with an interview of 50 hours of interviews.
Okay.
And they found, what are the conditions? What are the components that make great sex? So you're going to want to tune in.
All right. That'll be fun.
I'll be taking notes. All that's coming up right after this. So the conversation we had a couple weeks ago, Pam, was from an emailer that they had taken sex off the table for a little while. They had really grown a lot through the help of a therapist. They had started improving. And then when sex was being talked about, maybe we bring it back on the table, she started feeling this inordinate pressure. Right. And he's then, I feel like we're taking steps back because every night she goes to bed and she's really concerned and anxious about what do I do with the pressure inherent in sex in marriage.
Okay.
Right. And so what we said, highlights of that episode, this is worth going back to hear if you're new to the show. So jump back 2 weeks. It's all you got to do to find this show. It's entitled Mercy Sex. But one of the main things we kind of talked about is there's nothing you can do about pressure that comes inherently in sex in life. We sometimes, I think, get caught up in this dilemma of maybe I can have this pressure or no pressure.
But there's pressure either
But in
way,
reality,
right?
it's which pressure do you want?
Yeah.
Right. I get this pressure or that pressure. That's the only way that we get to deal with things. And so you have to accept the pressure. And then we also described a little bit of what is mercy sex. What are some of the characteristics? One way to really sum it up is when one person's really just having sex for the sake of having sex to get them other person off their back. They're just going through the motions, mailing it in, and not really participatory at all. And then harboring resentment and struggle over the choice that they feel pressed into doing.
So mercy sex always has resentment attached to it?
I don't know if it always does, but I think one of the insidiousnesses of that will be it can ultimately probably result in this, because resentment tends to happen most of the time, if you think about it, after something's gone on for a while. You know, a few times like, okay. And then you kind of get back to a better groove and you're like back to kind of choosing and being engaged and connected. And it's okay. But if it's a repeated one-sided equation here, it's going to probably manifest some resentment.
Gotcha.
Right. And it's going to turn into some real struggles and where we landed with the episode, what we hope to try to get across is the fine line between the higher desire and lower desires route when it comes to sex, of choosing it versus just being obligatory or feeling pressed into it or being mercy sex in a sense. And so the way I describe how do you differentiate between the two is if something goes on in your life, and I think this is applicable, tell me if you agree, I think this is applicable to all areas of our life. If something doesn't go the way I want, the way I determine if it's coming from the better or the goodness part of me or coming from the worst in me is who do I blame and who's responsible for what happened first.
Okay, so in either of those, you had said you choose it. You can either choose it but I would say even if I'm doing mercy sex, if I'm giving mercy sex, I'm still choosing to give it.
Well, the belief I've got is if you can make that out in the open more of, you know what, I'm not really interested in this for me, but I'm willing to be a part of it with you.
Okay. So
that's different rather than,
still chosen.
Okay, go ahead, get it over with quick, which are all phrases of powerlessness, basically. They're one down rather than I've got to face either going against myself in this regard, ultimately, or standing up to you.
Yeah. And
that's a dilemma.
And the uncomfortableness either way.
And it's the same kind of dilemma for the higher desire spouse too. I get to face accepting what little is offered or standing up to what is offered.
Right.
So it's still a dilemma.
Yeah.
And the pressure is still inherently similar. Right. And so a conversation took place from a couple that's been very active in the nation.
In the academy.
Well, this isn't the academy. This was in the whole scale.
Okay, gotcha.
Where she was just talking about that she would have loved to have heard some tidbits in this podcast sooner, like the blame versus choice. Okay, with stopping a sexual experience if it's not unfolding, because there's an element of life that has gone on, particularly in the Christian world, of, well, you really don't have a voice. This is one-sided for the man. Right. And so there has been either overtly, but for sure covertly, a message built in through the history of some of the Christian teachings out there.
Okay.
Right. That this is for the husband, period. It's not about a woman's sexuality. Right. It's about his sex life. That's really all that matters.
And we've got so many listeners to the podcast that the woman is the higher desire.
Yes.
So there's a lot of women out there hearing that and are like, are you kidding me?
Right.
This is not just about a man, right?
Right. Right. It's totally dismissing the fact that women have an incredible superpower when it comes to their sex life and their sexuality.
Yeah.
And could be tapped into, that produces a ton of goodness for themselves.
Yeah. So again, this broad brush view.
Right.
Burns me up.
Right. And so this was their experience for certain.
Perfect.
And so she talks about that she believed boundaries weren't available as a Christian woman, that God wanted her to be submissive when it came to her sex life, that it really was about him. It's one thing, and I love her quote here. It's one thing to argue with your husband that things are not working, but I didn't know how to refute the God these marriage resources were portraying.
Interesting.
Right. Because it's almost like it's a biblical route that we're supposed to be following in the manner in which I offer up my body, even if I don't honestly offer up my body, like that's somehow holy or good or serving and pleasing, when no, it's detrimental to both.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
I go back to what you said right before that she believed boundaries were not available.
And saying no was not a possibility.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. And that's insight into, I'm sure, many people's world that they feel like they can't.
Well,
right?
and to be honest, that was we didn't get the message. I won't speak for you completely, but there was for sure one-sidedness nature in the first 7-8 years of our marriage.
I would agree with that.
It wasn't that you wouldn't say no, but it wasn't really for you.
No, I didn't like it at all.
Right.
I didn't.
I was there. I remember. I look back at that and remember. And so she continues on just talking about she didn't really have a voice. And so she's having to learn the voice. And that some of this goes back to family of origin stuff. And I'm not going to go deep into that of what was written, but she makes the comment, and this is worth noting. And I appreciate you, ma'am, for bringing this up, that we have other podcasts like episode 583 and 549 on obligation sex, that this topic's been covered before. And so if this is ringing true with you, it's worth going back and hearing, because Jennifer Finlayson Fife is one of those that we talked about this idea, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it's nice to know there's more than just this one episode now too, that we're talking specifically on this subject. And so she would like to have us rounded out a little bit more on, so what do we do when we're faced with this? Because here's where the crux of what I want to get to.
Okay.
We've mentioned this a couple different times over the last month on the episodes. I've had this one quote keeps coming back in my notes as I'm preparing for each week. Right. Okay. And there's an element of life that we go through that I'm blind to things in myself and my family of origin and my upbringing. I know it had impact on me, but I'm blind to the severity of its impact.
Okay.
Right. Maybe I'm not seeing the fact that because of what's gone on, I have no voice. And so I just kind of have accepted that's what it is. Right. That's just my lot in life. Right. Don't we?
Yeah.
And we do this a lot in a lot of areas of my life. That's just not me. That's a phrase we'll throw out there. This could be on the food subject. why don't you like this? I'm speaking you here. Why don't you like this kind of veggie? It's got such great variety. Well, that's just not me, baby.
I just don't like it.
But the last 2 years has shown it can be me.
Yeah.
Right?
You've changed your palate. You've changed what you try.
So that's where there's an element of life that we have to realize that we have grown accustomed as people to looking at our struggles as reflections of unconscious processes. It's all because of something else that's gone down. That's why this is a dilemma that I'm facing.
Well, you go back to what she brought up about, what was the wording she used about this God that
had to refute the God message that like, no, this is how you are holy in the manner in which you go about being a wife.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if I've been brought up, if my current belief in God says this is how I'm supposed to treat this part of my life, and I want to hold firm to that biblical truth within my life,
right,
then that's a huge dilemma, right?
Absolutely, it is.
And all of us hopefully have gone back to evaluate and study and look at, what is it I believe? What is it that I'm putting all my actions, that I'm basing my actions, I'm basing my thoughts on? And is that really right? Is what I learned is what I learned growing up.
So having the courage,
where I am today,
having the courage to ask the questions of yourself and what you've grabbed a hold of, that maybe, I mean, there's 2 things that come to mind in this, Pam. One is we find survival mechanisms early in life when we need to, because every single person out there, I mean, this is some of the conversations we've had over the last couple of days in our household about this kind of topic and others that are going on. But one of the things that I think we all have to come to grips with is the world is not a safe place.
No,
it's just not. Yeah. Families, they're not always a safe place. Some never really are. And I'm meaning those words intentionally here. Mm-hmm. They are out to get you, actually. And some people have that as an upbringing. That was absolutely their experience. Mm-hmm. So we develop survival mechanisms during those times. And if you look back at it, it makes sense. Right? I'm reminded of one of my professors told a story. I haven't told this on the show in a long, long time. Okay. But he had a client he worked with that was at the Vernon Children's Prison and Hospital in Vernon, Texas. And it was one of his first clients. The kid kept rubbing his own feces all over himself.
Okay.
And it's like, what is going on there? Right. And so everybody just kept looking for, what's this disorder? What's his problem? He's got to have a disease. He's got to have a personality. It's something diagnosable. DSM-4.
Trying to keep a family member away from him?
Well, no. And that's the whole point, though, is when he got to digging in deeper, this kid figured out, people, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Because he had been horrifically abused.
Yeah.
All through his in and out of juvies and all through his family and foster family experiences. So he figured out, I rub feces all over myself. They leave me alone.
They leave me alone. They don't want to touch
So if you look at it in context, that kid's brilliant. It makes complete sense. Right?
I mean, there's some sick coping mechanisms out there, right? Because there's some sick stuff people have been through.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to say sick coping mechanisms because it makes sense in context. But when we carry it forward in our life,
right?
There you go. Thank you.
Gross to other people is what I'm representing.
That's perfect. Here. I get you. But when we carry that forward, that's when that coping mechanism isn't serving us like it did back then. Yeah. And that's where we have to have the courage to ask ourselves the questions. Is this working well for me? Is this helping me? Is this producing what I'm hoping it would actually produce?
Is it what would be intended for me?
Right.
In a godly relationship.
Right. And so a lot of, and I'm going to take on my profession for a quick little detour. A lot of my profession is built on this idea that therapy is a method of peeling away the layers of your character like an onion. Like I want to get down to what's the root of all of this. I come at it, thanks to Schnarch's training and his belief, it's not a matter of peeling away layers, but developing them, creating new layers. Because I have clients ask me this a lot. How much do you go back into the past? Right? Because our experience can be, let's go dig and dig and dig. I mean, Freud, that's what he did, psychoanalytic. I believe we retroactively take care of our past better by dealing with the present better. And I need to understand my past. Absolutely. So there is some digging and curiosity and questions and
it gives you clues,
scoping through things
and understanding of where you are today.
But it's understanding. The goal becomes developing layers to be more mature and resourceful adults who can solve our current situations better. And so, like to the woman that started the whole conversation, part of the process becomes when you understand how you have gotten to where you are, what do you do in real time now that changes your life better so the past doesn't rule you anymore? That's how we start to shift it. I understand how I've gotten here some. Now, how do I find my voice? That's where you start finding some serious power.
Okay. So I feel like we've talked a lot of theory and she wanted some practicals.
Okay.
I feel like we're talking all
so
theory.
Some of it goes right back to what we introduced of sex is starting to unfold that you're not interested in. You can't get there. Then you bring your voice forward and say, I'm not there. Mm-hmm. Maybe we alter it and I'll make it just for you if that's something she's willing to get to and give out of the goodness of her more than anything. Or it's I'm just not there. I'd like to table this until later and see, because then you put your spouse on the spot to say, well, what are you just willing to accept what little bit I'm going to offer or not? Because both of you have things being exposed here.
And then the question is, if night after night you say, no, this isn't right. What is that? I mean, have you gone a month without having sex? And it's just because it just still doesn't feel right to you, right? What else is it you've got to go after?
Well,
so once you've had, so that's one step, Corey, that I think is maybe step number one. I speak up and I say, I'm just not there and I can't do this when it's all just about you. But what if that's happened for a month?
Okay, well, then I want to add the caveat here of the speaking up your truth better is actually a step of being more sexual better in and of itself.
Okay.
Maybe sex isn't happening, but you're actually leaning more towards being sexual because it's a different power of you coming forward.
Okay.
Because think about this. If you went through, let's go back. Let's use our life here.
Okay.
We can speak much more well to this. How about that for Englishing? More well. I goodly speak. If it's one-sided and you were, I want to be more involved in this. I'm not getting much out. It's kind of what it ultimately culminated in.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, if it's a legit power from your goodness, best in you kind of a move, immediately improves whatever does happen. How? Because it's bringing you more into the equation of your life, the equation of our life.
I hear that from one perspective.
Okay.
Because I'm not willing to just maybe just lay there, right? And let it happen to me. If I'm relying on you to come at it with a different approach so that I can feel better. I just speaking from, what am I trying to spit out here? It took me years to finally come around and figure out more of what I wanted and get more into what I expected you to do all the work, I guess, is where I'm going with this.
That's a great example, because that's kind of where I went too because now our language can be, because of the moves from both of us at various times, some of them were subtle moves and some were monumental moves, individually speaking. Now there's much more likely, if something was starting to unfold as far as what was being offered up or sought, was going to be more towards the one-sidedness. And it's like, because I would maybe bring up something with you and you're just not there.
Yeah.
Because of the day, the struggle, sickness, kids, stress, whatever. Now it's like, okay, you know what? You have a greater likelihood of being able to say, no, I'm just not there. Or you've even done this to me a couple times. I'm not really there, but how much energy do you got to help me try to get there? At least that's more overt about the dynamic between us.
I don't think those instances, though, are mercy sex.
I don't either. That's kind of the point of moving towards it.
The mercy sex was earlier on.
Yes.
And that's as the two of us try and clarify where we are, right? It was earlier on when I felt like it was one-sided. I felt like I was just an object.
Yes.
Right. And I wanted you to make some sort of change that made me feel better about who I was and what my sexuality was. And
like I was supposed to waken that up for you.
That's in a way. That's what I thought. Right. Okay. Because when we were dating, I was awake. I wanted it all the time.
You were awake. Yes.
There was just this transition once we got married that said, and we've talked about it on the show, some things that happened that kind of, I think, in my opinion, flipped that switch.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I expected you to make some of those shifts for me. I'm not saying that's what everyone has. I'm saying that's where we were. And it took a long time for me to then not have that responsibility be on you.
Right.
Right. The responsibility then became my own.
Right.
So in practical steps too, I think that there's got to be this, speak up and say, I'm not willing to stand for this. And then I've also got to look at am I expecting something of my spouse to make me feel better about this situation? Mm-hmm. Did they need to change some mentality potentially?
Mm-hmm.
Do I also, though, need to look at, do I even want sex? Is this something?
Thank you. That's what I was just about to bring up. Do I want this to be a part that's enhanced in my life or even existent in my life? Right. And I need to be honest about that, because sometimes people keep dancing around this equation because they don't want to take the risk of actually saying, I don't want this in my life, because the cost of that could mean the marriage.
Well, and I think part of the question is, do I not want it just because of the person I'm in here with, because I don't trust him or whatever the case may be?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just something I 100% wouldn't want at all,
mm-hmm.
even if they made some sort of transition?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, that's what the whole crux of this conversation, Pam, to kind of wind this down, is these are the things that ultimately are being exposed in both members of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we often do is avoid or bite our tongue or want to change them or do all these other things or blame.
Mm.
Well, this is just the way I am, rather than have you taken the courageous steps to see, is that really, because I've had clients before that have like, I finally have put it off long enough. I got to get serious about this aspect of my life.
Mm.
And that in and of itself is a gigantic courageous step.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, if we look at what we're really being asked of in marriage and in sex, it's unavoidable. But I have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, the way life on life terms inevitably happens, if I don't choose, life will choose for me.
Somehow. Yeah.
Something will happen.
Yeah.
And the problem becomes magnified when one partner really wakes up.
Mm.
And then is like, I'll wait. I'm going to see. Because what they've actually done is they're not holding their partner. The higher desire is not holding the lower desire hostage for it.
Yeah.
But they're not being incongruent with their character, mm-hmm. or out of line with their integrity. They're just like, no. I want this in my life, and I'm going to start enhancing that. And I'm going to start being more sexual in how I interact. And that's the goal then, because I want couples to hear from this. This is not in my mind. You need to have sex more. I tell wives that will call me because my husband wants sex life and I'm just not interested. And they're like, I try to right out the gate say, you know what? I want you to be very, very clear. This is not an opportunity for two men to gang up on a woman to try to get her to have more sex. Because that is not what I'm trying to do.
Two men meaning you as the therapist.
Me as the therapist and her husband
and wife.
Right.
Let's be clear there.
Thank you. But it's recognizing, I don't want to talk anybody into something. I want them to understand what's being exposed in them. And now what is the best in you do about that,
mm-hmm.
that brings your best forward? that grows you to where there truly is the possibility of a lot more goodness and room for both of you. That's the ultimate goal here. And if we look at the dynamic and the dilemma of our sex lives and our marriages in its entirety, all of it is the drive wheel and the grindstone of our growth. I just have to have the courage to see it that way and then take the steps accordingly.